So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lanny Davis-Frecker. I am President and CEO of Julie Billiart Schools. On behalf of Abby David and Bridgeway Academy, Greg Borio and the Rich Center for Autism at Youngstown State University, and parents of children with autism or other special learning needs, I welcome you to the Ohio Autism and Special Needs Scholarship Advocacy Forum. Quite a mouthful. As we talk today, please feel free to insert questions into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, as we do have time at the end of this forum to answer some of the questions or get back to you if need be. So today, some of our objectives, you're going to hear from our panel on the following topics. You're going to hear about the history of the Autism and the John Peterson Scholarships, the recent legislative changes to the scholarships, really including the key differences that were created as a result of the most recent past operating budget this past June. We're also going to talk about steps that parents and schools can take to increase their own advocacy in support of the scholarships, because this is really truly our first attempt to mobilize this parent group and to help raise our voices and help understand, kind of from an education standpoint, how this benefit and affect our community. So here with us today, we have the following panel members. We have State Senator Bob Peterson, who has been a staunch supporter of the voucher programs and was integral to our work in improving both scholarships. So thank you so much, Senator Peterson. We have Avril Meaden, who is the Special Projects Director for the State Senate. We have Chad Aldist, who is the President of the Thomas Fordham Institute. We have Abby David, who is the co-founder of Bridgeway Academy. We have Bill Goss and Noah Mitchell, who are parents of Bridgeway Academy students. We also have Kelly Slattery, who is an attorney and parent of a Julie Billiart School student accessing the John Peterson Scholarship. And also on the Zoom, we have our professional advocates who are parents of children with autism and special needs. We have Mike Hartley, President of Swing State Strategies, and Matt Cox here with us today, President of Capital Partners. So I'd first like to hand it over to Senator Bob Peterson and Avril Meaden. But before I do that, I simply want to thank you again, Senator, for your support and for understanding the great need for quality education options for parents in the state of Ohio. You've been steadfast from the beginning in your support of these programs, and a huge part of the gains that we achieved this summer with the Autism Scholarship funding amount increase. So thank you, Senator.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure. And as I said yesterday, talking to a group, you guys did the work. I just introduced the amendment and the suggestion, and you guys took it from there. And you truly sold the program, and that's what one of the things I think I was asked to talk about was advocacy. And what I always say to any group, whether it's high school students or trade associations or an autism group, is that we make better decisions when you talk to us. And so I encourage you to talk to us, talk to your legislators. You will be surprised. I'm always surprised. We spend a lot of money trying to connect to voters in a variety of different ways, especially when we're campaigning. And so many people, I have the pleasure of representing a district that includes about 360,000 people. And it's amazing how many people don't even know my name. And that's fine. That's the way it is. People are living their lives and doing things that are important, taking care of families and doing their jobs. And that's what makes America great. But I'm a better legislator if people talk to me, tell me what their concerns are, what their needs are. And all legislators are that way. So I encourage you to be involved in the process. That's what democracy requires. It is a participatory sport. And it's, our country and state's future depends on it. So I encourage you to be involved. And certainly the autism advocates and the people were very involved in helping make this possible. And that's why it was very easy to get done. Fortunately, Ohio, amazingly, even through the pandemic, we were the economy is doing fairly well. We have tax revenue coming in, and so we wanted to invest in places that made sense, and certainly helping people live the best life they can is an important piece of that. And so I was glad to introduce the amendment and glad to get it through the process.
Senator, if I can just make a comment and ask you a question. One thing I always tell my clients is you don't realize how busy the days are of the legislators. Obviously, everyone's busy, particularly parents with kids who have special needs, but you get handed a schedule every day by your aide, and you have what, 6, 7, 8 meetings, 10 meetings in a day. And that's why it's so important for parents to be involved, because you don't have the time to really focus on things during the day unless people take the extra effort to make the time to meet with you.
Yeah, so very much. And I would characterize our jobs as very seasonal. There are times of the year when, and Averill may touch on this too later, but there are times of the year when we don't have any time at all. There are times when I see my wife as I'm falling into bed or as I'm stumbling out of bed early in the next morning. And then there's times when we have time. And so one of the great things you can do is when we're back home, when we're in our district, we usually have more time when we're in our district. So that's a great time to connect. At least my time in Columbus is very scheduled. And I think most legislators are very scheduled, as you're talking about. So, be cognizant of the season. If it's the last weeks of a budget cycle, which is a odd numbered years in June, May or June, we don't have a lot of time. During the summer or during the campaign year, as we're campaigning, we have more time. So take advantage of those seasons when we're very available. But communicate with us. My office, people communicate with us in all forms: emails, texts, phone calls, personal visits. All those things work. Whatever you find works best for you and for your representative or senator, what you should do.
And Averill, from your perspective, why don't you add a few comments about the importance of advocacy and how you saw this budget process play out for the special needs vouchers?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And to the senator's point, I think he's exactly right on this. The legislature covers all issues across the state, from the gas tax to school choice issues to John Peterson and autism to rehab and corrections and rehab. We take on all of the issues of the state. So people are constantly coming in to talk to us about these issues. And in a sense, as policymakers and as staff, we respond to the things that come to us. And so when parents come to us, we talk to them about the issues that they're experiencing. And as far as seasonality, a quick reference that I like to keep in mind for constituents that are coming in is that our schedule generally mimics the school year. So when kids are in school from August to about June, that's when the legislature is most active in Columbus. But when kids are out of school, that's when our legislators are generally home at the holidays, during the summer break. So those are good times. Matt, I know you want me to talk a little bit about the budget as far as how the process unfolds. We start working on the budget well ahead of when it comes out to the public. And that really at any time is a good time to engage us and let us know what's happening. I was actually talking to a colleague this morning about John Peterson and the autism program. And unlike our Ed Choice programs that we have really, in a sense, tinkered with and had to adjust over time, autism and John Peterson are for more specific things than our Ed Choice program. And so we set up a program. We've really just been talking about the increases in the amounts over time, and I can get into those. But as far as the tinkering and how things are going, we hear far less from providers about restrictions on services or eligibility for kiddos than we do in the Ed Choice program. And so it's really good for us to hear from parents and schools on what's actually happening on the implementation of these programs.
And that's a great point, Averill. And I think that's why we're doing this today, is to begin that process of connecting legislators and staff with parents of children that are using these programs in their schools. So I appreciate your help and input.
Matt, maybe if I could jump in and add a couple of things. Oftentimes, as I talk to people, they get, later, they get disappointed that they weren't able to talk to me, during one of those busy times. But they talk to my staff. And I'm not sure how it works in every office, but in my office, anything that my staff hears, I'm going to hear. And I think that's true of most offices. And many times, my staff can resolve an issue. And before I even, the problem is solved before I even know of it. So take advantage of the staff and don't be upset if that's who you are talk to or who has the opportunity and time to visit with you. And I will try and circle back, as I get more time, but certainly that's an option. So to take advantage of that. Yeah,
and usually you want to talk to staff first to make sure that the legislator knows what it is you're talking about if you get a chance to meet them.
Senator, real quick, because I know you can't stay on with us the whole time. What is the most impactful type of reach out for a parent to make? Is it really a letter? Is it a conversation? Is it a scheduled call with your staff? What do you believe, especially in this pandemic time, to be the most impactful?
In my office, the rule in my office is every unique email. If I get a form email, so my answer is anything that's not a form email. If it's a form email, if I'm getting 5 or 500 of the same email, I don't see that. I don't really, to be honest, I don't really care. My staff handles all of those. If it's a unique email, a unique contact, I see every one of those. And in almost all cases, I personally respond to those unique emails. So for my office, anything that any of those work.
Okay.
I do think we're human, and personal contact is always better. And the other thing I would suggest is I'd like to know what is happening. I mean, what's your concern? Tell me your concern. And oftentimes people come with a solution to that concern, and there may be better solutions out there. So we may not do exactly what you think you want us to do. But we may find a way that actually works better because it's a broader issue.
That's a great point.
And actually, Senator Peterson, I think that one of the things that you're exactly right, that the solution may not look exactly as everyone intended or as they thought would be ideal. One of those ways was in the budget, the differences between the Autism Scholarship amounts and the John Peterson amounts. And really, when we're working together, when you're crafting something, we have to put that into the state budget, which has all of those policies in it. Particularly this year, John Peterson didn't raise as high as we wanted it to raise. And for a very technical sort of reason, when we plugged in John Peterson into the formula that we received from the House as part of our conference process here, which was at the end of the budget process, it actually, in sort of an interesting way, reduced the overall categorical spending in districts. And so then we had to put in some pieces into the formula that weren't necessarily a natural fit to make sure we weren't reducing district spending on special needs. And therefore that sort of yielded where we were on the John Peterson, just making it level with districts. Because we had some categories that just tanked under the formula for really not a known issue. But I think what we're looking to do is find ways for all of the scholarships to be tied to a natural escalator. One of the things, particularly in John Peterson and autism, and even in a choice that we've been fighting for and trying to implement for a decade now, is just these increased amounts. And it'd be nice if we could talk about what the services are doing for kids and how we're getting availability, and we're creating new situations for kids that are ideal for them, instead of us constantly focusing on the dollar amount. and you as advocates focusing only on the dollar amount. So we're trying to find places where we can peg these amounts so that they're naturally increasing as costs are increasing, as budgets are kind of increasing for providers. And just in this particular budget, we saw just this weird positioning of that in the formula where it just really wasn't, it wasn't increasing, it was decreasing. And so we're continuing to work on that, not necessarily pegged to a number that naturally increases these numbers over time.
That's excellent. Senator, do you have any, I know at some point you need to jump off. So anything from the panelists or directly to Senator Peterson?
No, thank you both for being here and joining us. Very important
Yes.
information.
Yes, thank you so much. It's so helpful. So now we will hear from Chad Aldis, really about the history of the programs and some quick facts around the special needs vouchers.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So as Lanny said, my name's Chad Aldis from Thomas B. Fordham Institute. We're an education nonprofit based in Columbus that does advocacy around school choice and a number of other issues. So it's great to be with you here today. Start with the Autism Scholarship. It was enacted in 2003, and it was students first used it in 2004. I'd be remiss if I did not say the tremendous effort that went into the creation of this program by a lot of people, but specifically Representative John Peterson, who was an unfailing champion for this work and this program. It is also the second oldest scholarship specifically for students with disabilities in the country, which makes it a bit unique. And as Avril mentioned earlier, it's amazing how much lawmakers got right in that the program hasn't changed a lot, and it's now 17, 18 years old, and which is really incredible and a testament. Eligibility is very straightforward. Any student with an IEP that cites autism is eligible. No cap on the number of students that can participate in the program, and there are no testing requirements in the Autism Scholarship. The program has grown consistently over the years. In recent years, the enrollment's kind of leveled out and been stable. A few numbers over the years. It started in 2004 with only 70 students across the state. By 2009, it went over 1,000, where it hit 1,449. 2 years later, in 2011, it went over 2,000 students. In 2015, it went over 3,000 students, and just last year in 2020, it went over 4,000 students. So incredible impact on families and communities across the state. The structure of the program, as I noted, has stayed relatively stable over the past 18 years. And the bulk of the changes, again, as Avril said, have been centered around the funding amounts. The Peterson Scholarship. This was enacted in 2011, but it almost got done in 2007. So as you guys are thinking about the advocacy here, this is a program the legislature passed in 2007, but then it was vetoed out of the state budget by Governor Ted Strickland. That's how much advocacy is important and how you can't take anything for granted in this work and how long progress sometimes takes. So the Autism Scholarship program, from the numbers I just gave you, was very popular, grew quickly over the years. Other families with students with special needs wanted the same sort of options. But despite lawmakers consistently pushing for it, it took a full 8 years before it was passed. Students first started using the John Peterson, the aptly named in honor of Rep. Peterson's scholarship, the John Peterson Scholarship in 2012. Eligibility is very similar, students with an IEP. The program, though, is capped at 5% of the students statewide with an IEP. That means that the cap right now under current law would be around 12,800 students. There is an assessment required, although recent changes in law give a lot of flexibility around what that assessment might be. Until recently, the program experienced large, fast growth every year. In 2013, in year one, as a testament to how much there was a desire for this program, 1,340 students used the program in the first year, which is an incredible rollout for a brand new program. It increased in most years, it's increased between 500 and 800 students, and it reached a high in 2020 of 6,858 students. So about half of the cap is currently being used. And it dipped down last year during the pandemic, but I would guess that number will go back up this year. Like the Autism Scholarship program, the changes have mostly been around, it has changed a little bit more than the Autism Scholarship program, I think because the number of students that impact statewide, school districts have pushed back over the years against a few of the provisions in this program, like eligibility and the funding amounts for certain disability categories. So just a couple more things. Key differences. I think I was asked to point that out just to make sure people understood the differences between the programs. Structurally, they're very, very similar. The Autism Scholarship allows for pre-K students to participate, while the Peterson Scholarship does not. The Peterson Scholarship, as I mentioned, has a cap on the number of participants. The Autism Scholarship does not. And with the recent budget changes, as the Senator and Averill both mentioned, the funding amounts for Peterson at the highest levels are going to be a little bit lower than in the Autism Scholarship program. Speaking of funding levels, because of your advocacy and the changes in the budget, the funding for FY22 will be in autism will be $31,500. FY23 that goes up to $32,455. When this program was introduced, this cap was $20,000. So that it's amazing how much more that providers will be able to do with these resources, and a testament to the legislature for prioritizing this program. The Peterson Scholarship varies by the degree of disability based on a state rubric and framework. So it can vary anywhere from 7,700 up to a statutory maximum of 27,000. Both programs now are funded directly from the state. So they will no longer be deducted from school district budgets, which hopefully will make your advocacy work a little bit easier. Districts aren't going to be able to point to a number in the budget and say, we lost X amount to the John Peterson Scholarship or the Autism Scholarship, which is great because this program should be about kids and students and their needs, and not about, about those programs. We need to make sure every student has the resources they need. The last thing is the Peterson Scholarship will go up as base funding and funding for student in the general budget increases. So they've tied an automatic escalator. So the funding amounts for the base amount and for the various disability categories will be going up year over year as funding for traditional public schools increases, which is important. So hopefully you don't have to come back to the legislature asking for increases each and every year. So I'll stop there, but I'm happy to answer questions.
So Chad, thank you. I noted Bob Peterson making a look when you mentioned the cap on the number of students that can use the John Peterson Special Needs Scholarship. And this, there was a question in the chat about what happens when that cap is reached. And what happens is you go to the legislature and ask for the cap to be removed. But that's something that Senator Peterson and Averill, if you want to start working on that, that would be a good thing to tackle ahead of time, not when we actually reach the cap.
Yeah, I think that was the ask, right? Right there.
That's right. Yep.
Chad, do you believe that we did have a question come in kind of catered towards you? Do we really feel that sometimes parents, when they're advocating for their student in an IEP meeting with their district, because we all know you have to still have an IEP from your district of residence to access these scholarships. Well, sometimes I think the families feel a little bit of pressure from the public schools that they're taking money or that they're doing something wrong, even though they are absolutely allowed and by law to access these. Do you have any advice, or do you feel that this new showing them as part of the state budget directly funded will help with this? Any comments there?
Yeah, I wish it would help. I think it helps policymakers, but I don't think it will at least immediately make it easier for parents to have that discussion for school districts. I think there's been a mindset over the years, and of course this is Chad Aldis and Fordham's position, not necessarily the representative of others on this call or in this forum, but I mean, many times school districts have, at least in practice, seemed to think that, or act like every student who lives within their boundaries was sort of destined to come to their school. And ownership's a strong word, but certainly that those are their dollars. I think what we've seen in public policy in the state of Ohio over the past 20 years with the growth of school choice is that the legislature's made a conscious decision to shift authority to parents to decide what's in the best interest of their children. And it's a change that's been a long time in coming. So, but when you're having those conversations in IEP meetings with districts, and it's going to vary by district, it's still going to be uncomfortable, I imagine, in some places. And it's a shame. But as a parent, you're in the right. The law is clear, and they don't have to like it. But this is your decision as a parent needs to be trusted and respected in these decisions.
Well, and also there's a state requirement that schools tell parents who have an IEP that there are these special needs options. And as a parent of a special needs student who goes to a public school, I can tell you we don't get that information from our school district. I'm not going to complain because it's a great school district, but we have never been told about the special needs scholarships through our IEP meetings.
Yeah, and I also believe it's kind of a catch-22 when you're saying, you know, the districts might not like it, but the parents are in the right. That parent still has to work with that district to get the services on the IEP that are somewhat indicative of what a kid needs in order to be successful. So it does, you know, no parent wants to go in fighting, but oftentimes, you know, that is kind of the result of, well, you're taking our kids and you're taking money from our district. So it's difficult.
I noticed there's another question in the Q&A that I looked up while we were while we were doing this that I might be able to help with. And I guess Miss Rosalie Groh asked, why does a scholarship for traumatic brain injury exclude children with injury from birth? And I think that's because of the federal definition under IDEA of traumatic brain injury. And I will put the link in the site as soon as I get done talking. It specifically excludes injuries from birth or the birthing process that impacted the brain. So I think that Ohio law currently just simply reflects and is consistent with sort of the federal rights under IDEA. Doesn't mean it has to be that way, of course, under state law, but I think right now that's the way Ohio has structured its program.
Thank you, Chad. That's extremely helpful. As questions come up again at the end, we will get to them, and I'll kind of show the one to cap off this discussion. Maybe Avril, you have some answers here. Why is the cap for such? Why is there a difference in such of the cap amounts on both scholarships to date? That was a question that did come in.
Yeah, I saw that in the chat. I think we were able to raise autism because it's not really tied to those categories. And I think it was in this budget in particular, just the melding of a brand new school formula such that the public school amounts would be so much lower than what we'd be paying in a John Peterson scholarship. But I think we're working towards that. When we appropriate dollars for each of these scholarships, we do it holistically in the education budget portion of our state biennial budget, which is every 2 years in the odd year. And maybe you know, maybe you don't, we appropriate billions with a B, billions of dollars in our state budget to all things that state government touches, including billions of dollars in the education space. And so we look at each of the programs and we say, what is the appropriate level of funding for this? And it's sort of looking at usage and what that particular scholarship could purchase for a family, and we weigh that against other programs and other things in the formula, and we try to come up with the best case scenario. I did see a question in there about that the scholarships are significantly lower than some of the costs to go to a school or to provide the services needed for kids with autism or with special needs. We try to weigh that against how much we're spending in the public sector versus the private sector, and it's all kind of a holistic approach to funding education in our state. We do believe in these programs though, and so we're committed to continuing to put dollars in them. There is a political side to this that everyday constituents should know, and that is when we're spending a certain amount in the public sector, we have to get members here to say, all right, we want to spend twice that or 3 times that in the private sector. And it is really getting everyone in the state house, the legislators, to get on board with spending that amount of money, comparing what they spend in at a public school. And so all things considered, we try to do increases. We try to get them a lot higher. As Chad mentioned, we have made, we've nearly doubled the program at this point. And so I think it's more of us just taking a look at costs and seeing how much further we can go in the future in the next budget. And you know, we welcome conversations from parents and advocates at any point to tell us what real costs are. Tell us what these dollars can provide for a kid with autism or a kiddo with a special need, and then you know, we see where we can stake our flag and get members to on board with increases.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it's a great segue into hearing from some of our parents as well as a provider of Bridgeway Academy. So we have Abby David here and some parents willing to talk to us about what that experience in the school provider side really looks like. So Abby.
Thank you. Thanks for having us today. We were really appreciative, and obviously to Senator Peterson for all of his supports and getting the scholarship out there and raised. That was really imperative for our families here at Bridgeway Academy. And I'm going to let you talk to 2 of our great dads here in just a second. But, you know, talking about the reason why we got involved, you know, we've been an Autism Scholarship provider since 2005. So we do remember the $20,000, you know, years ago. And, you know, for us, our services have absolutely changed since 2005. You know, we started off as a half-day program because we knew the services that we were providing were extremely comprehensive, but, you know, there were limitations to how far those dollars would go. And as we grew as an organization, as the need increased, I mean, I don't know, you know, we do primarily utilize Autism Scholarship here, just so we know. We do take John Peterson, but we only have very few families. I think we only have like 2 right now. Is that, you know, we realized that the needs for our families had changed and the comprehensiveness had changed. And right now, the new data that came out is 1 in 41 children are born on the autism spectrum. And so that needs increasing as we watch also our wait list here at Bridgeway increase. And so one of the thoughts that we've had over the years is we've always wanted to advocate for our families so that they can get the services that their children deserve. And so, you know, even when it went from 20 to 27,000, we were down at the State House with our families, and you know, we were going in and having those conversations. We actually tried independently to do this 4 years ago to get the Autism Scholarship increased. It didn't work. And so this last time, I think it was just the timing. It was the people who we had helping us on our side with swing state strategies. And then obviously hearing about other organizations like the Billiart School who are also doing this. And we learned that we were trying to do it at the same time. It's important that we're all advocating together, but thinking about moving forward and what the needs are out there, all providers need to be involved. You know, they all need to be helping to make these services continue to happen for our families. Our costs just increase every single year. If we want to be able to have the best teachers and provide the best services, those dollars increase. We need to keep being able to pay for them to be here and to teach and provide therapies to our students, and costs only go up every year. So that gap gets greater and greater every single year. So the index knowing we have it for next year is huge. And obviously we're going to continue to hopefully help fight in the next couple of years to continue to have that index so we don't have to keep doing this every 6 years. But anyhow, it's been a great honor to be able to be a part of this year, and being able to, tell our families that news, and just for the whole state of Ohio, it was just a real honor to be a part of it. So, but I'm gonna let you talk to some of two of our dads who have really unique stories about why they even moved to Ohio. And it was, some of it's due to the Autism Scholarship. So I will let you guys take it away.
Oh, well, Noah, I think that's you and me, right? We're the two awesome dads she was talking about.
I think that is us, Bill.
I
let you go first.
I think she was talking about you and somebody else, though. She said two awesome dads. It's you and somebody else. I'm not sure who I am here, but so you want me to go first then?
Sure, why not?
Sure. All right. Okay, I'll do that. All right. Well, so basically, my wife Mary, who's in the room with me here, she's just off camera, but she and I have two children. One is our younger son Harry, who's 14 now and is a student at Bridgeway Academy. Harry's on the autism spectrum and was diagnosed when he was 2 years old. When we were living in South Carolina, I was born and raised in South Carolina. That's home for me. That's where my people are. And except that in South Carolina, the services and the Autism Scholarship doesn't exist in South Carolina. The services that are here available in Central Ohio don't exist in South Carolina. We had one ABA provider who was 40 minutes away one way. So we were driving 80 minutes round trip twice a day, every day of the week, every day, Monday through Friday, to get him to ABA therapy, which we were paying for out of pocket. Our insurance through our employer, which is the Presbyterian Church USA, provided $36,000 a year for that therapy, and with a lifetime cap of $125,000 a year. ABA therapy at that time was $70 an hour. They recommended 40 hours a week for Harry. We settled on 20 hours a week. The insurance would pay for 10 hours a week, not quite 10, and would cut him off after 3.5 years. We had a whole ruckus with our employer, with the church, about the mental health parity, and that they were not allowed to set those kind of limits, and it did not matter. We were turned down at every step. At some point, when we were on the verge of having to file a lawsuit against our own church, they actually allowed for individual exceptions. And so we would have been granted an exception just on a case-by-case basis. But around that time is when we felt a call to Ohio. The church in Ohio, Overbrook Presbyterian Church in Clintonville, where I serve, they sent me their information and said, we'd like you to take a look. And I remember looking at that thinking, well, what a nice little church. It's a shame it's in Ohio. I don't think a South Carolina boy is going to do well in Ohio. But then it's when Mary, who's our associate pastor, actually took a look at some things and said, I think you really need to take a look and see what Ohio is all about, because there's some interesting things there. And that was when we learned about the Autism Scholarship. And that's when we learned about how in South Carolina, we had one provider 40 minutes away, but here in Columbus, we had multiple ABA providers. There are no schools there for children on the spectrum. Here, there were 4. So we've had choices and options. And we've actually made use of a couple of those before we finally found our way to Bridgeway. And Bridgeway Academy has been a godsend, a life-changing thing for our son. He was 5 years old when we moved here. He couldn't talk. He couldn't go to the bathroom by himself. There were a lot of things that he couldn't do. I think a lot of times people hear autism and they think Asperger's, or they think Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. Well, just a little quirky, maybe a little robotic, but in most ways, kind of, what you might expect from a person. But Harry is very different. Harry has some real struggles and challenges, and Bridgeway has done amazing work in helping him to meet them and overcome them. He talks now, he reads, he has conversations with us, not lengthy in-depth conversations, but back and forth conversations. He is able to take care of himself and to advocate for himself. When we moved here, if he hurt something, he couldn't tell us what hurt. He could just say, ow, maybe. Now he can say, ow, my knee hurts, ow, I've got a pain here. So it's been, when we moved here, we had no hope for him. We were afraid for his future. Now we have hope for his future, in a sense that there's possibility for him. And we're so thankful for that. And that is absolutely because of the availability of the Autism Scholarship here in Ohio and the presence of agencies like Bridgeway Academy. And I'm so thankful for those. I think there's probably more to be said. I think one of the things to remember about this Autism Scholarship is that it makes providers available because they know they can get paid. That Rhonda Buford was the ABA provider in South Carolina that worked with us. And when insurance would not pay for the second half of the year because we'd reached our $36,000 limit, she treated Harry gratis, and because she could not turn him away. But today she is no longer practicing in South Carolina because the funding is not there for her. Here in Ohio, because there is adequate funding, you can have providers. If that funding were to go away, the providers would go away too, because there's no way for them to actually provide for their families and be paid. So, and Bridgeway is more than just providing ABA, it's a school. So he is learning, he's not just being treated as someone with autism on autism spectrum, he's actually learning school. He takes social studies and science and reading and math, and he's learning those things, and he can do those things now. And he's been on grade level for those for a long time. But also too, all of the therapies that he needs, the speech therapy, the physical therapy, are all right there in-house at Bridgeway. And that's what this scholarship makes possible, is for agencies and schools like Bridgeway to exist. And so we are extremely thankful, and we are so blessed, and we just can't say enough good things about the Autism Scholarship and about Abby and Aaron and Bridgeway Academy and all the teachers and staff there. It's just, I get choked up and teary when I think about it, when I'm talking about it, because I understand I feel like I understand what a great blessing this has been for my son and for my family. And I'm going to stop now and let you take over.
Thank you, Bill. I mean, you said a lot of what I was going to say, so I will echo some of those sentiments and just share a little bit about our journey with the Autism Scholarship, and specifically with Bridgeway Academy. Like Bill, my family comes from a different state, and so when we got my son, I should say that my son is TJ, and he is in 4th grade at Bridgeway Academy, and I call him the Bridgeway Academy mayor because he knows everybody and everybody knows him. And so, but we got our autism diagnosis with TJ, and we were living in Texas at the time. And similar to Bill's experience, there is no Autism Scholarship. There are not very many services, and there are almost none service providers like Bridgeway Academy, where you have sort of a one-stop shop. And so we were similarly taking TJ to school, picking him up from school, driving him 40 miles in traffic, Dallas traffic, to get him to ABA therapies. And it was stressful. You know, one of the things that we don't think about when we think about autism assistance and just kind of helping with those resources, that, you know, most of the time, you have two parents that are trying to work. And so if you are trying to do all these things, it's very difficult to process that. I was a teacher at the time. And so processing having to pick up your kid at 1 o'clock because this program is on a half a day and he has to get to therapy at 3 o'clock, and then it's just a mess. And so we actually, we moved to Columbus. I knew nothing about Bridgeway Academy or any of the resources that were available there, or even the Autism Scholarship. And TJ's mom was doing some research about, you know, where he would be going to school. And there were, as Bill pointed out, there were several options. And so we were really excited about that. But then we saw the cost to go to these schools. And I was just like, so which one of us is selling the organ or something? Like, what are we doing? Like, how is this going to work? It's just not like we don't have $30,000 just sitting around, you know, to make this happen. And so very shortly after that, we heard about the Autism Scholarship. And back in those days, it was, I believe, around 26, 27. And so there was still a small gap in between. And so even that, we were like, okay, like that's an additional $3,000 to $4,000 that we've got to figure out what we're going to do. And so, but knowing that we had that help was really instrumental in us making the decision to bring TJ to Bridgeway Academy. And then this increase that has happened has just made that such a wonderful opportunity. I will say that I know that there are, and I believe that Abby mentioned this. And so I want to just kind of put a pin in this, that the advocacy work that needs to continue to make sure that that increases is something that we all need to be very active in, because it can be the difference between a family being able to afford to go to a place like Bridgeway Academy, or them having to make some really, really tough decisions about what they're doing as a family and what they're doing for their child. And so that just ought not be. And so if we can continue to do that work to make sure that those increases, every place else costs more every year, and you know that, right? So I don't know why this will be different. And so we should really do the work to make sure that that is something that, as Abby mentioned, we don't have to fight every 6 years. But as Bill mentioned, TJ is at Bridgeway Academy and doing wonderful. His developmental skills from the time that he came to now. I mean, we argue. Like I never. There were times where I didn't know that he would talk, and now we have arguments, and so he talks very well now, and so we're thankful for that. We're just talking to his mom this morning about how he is a very persuasive and talkative fellow, and so we're appreciative of that. So I just wanted to just close by saying that, you know, we are thankful for the work that has been done and the work that will continue, and that it is making real impact in people's lives. Sometimes we do these things like, oh, that's really cool, we got this increase, but I can tell you that I listened to and heard from several families as they were crying because the reality that their kid was going to be able to continue to go to Bridgeway Academy was manifested because of this increase. And so it's making a real difference, and we got to keep the fight up, because this is important work.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Abby, for sharing your perspective and just giving us that parent perspective. Clearly, that's what has helped us move the needle here with these scholarships. So I too have a wonderful parent here. It's a wonderful mom, and her name is Kelly Slattery, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about being on the John Peterson Scholarship and how it has impacted her family when one scholarship rises and the other kind of stays where it is. Kelly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Slattery. My son, as Lanny said, is a recipient of the John Peterson Scholarship, and he is categorized as having a traumatic brain injury. So I'll give you just a little bit of a background about my son and our family and sort of why I'm here today. But our son was born in 2009. He's 12 years old now, and he was initially developing normally, I think, as so often many parents have. But in 2011, 10 days after Christmas, I vividly remember the day, our world came just to an absolutely screeching halt when he had what we've now found out was his first seizure. We knew something was very, very wrong with our son, but it took us quite some time to figure out what that was. And he was eventually diagnosed with a disorder called infantile spasms, which, it's a seemingly benign term, but is a catastrophic form of epilepsy. We were given very grim statistics. There was a 95% chance he would have severe and profound mental retardation, 1 in 8 chance he would never live to see his 20s, high likelihood he would never talk. And as you can imagine, our world, changed in an instant. We tried every treatment imaginable. He continued to seize hundreds of seizures per day. So we traveled around for second and third opinions, did everything we could, and found a doctor who felt that his condition could be caused by a malformation in his brain. So about 8 months after his diagnosis, we kissed our little boy goodbye as they wheeled him back to remove the left temporal lobe of his brain. The surgery initially seemed to be a success and stopped the seizures, but a few months later, things started to regress again. And we ended up having to make the difficult decision to have yet another brain surgery for our son, this time to remove the left parietal and occipital lobes of his brain. That second surgery had turned out to be, the miracle that we had been hoping for, and Will has remained seizure-free ever since that time. And it was the first time for him that we actually had hope that he might be able to learn and really, to have a future. But as you can imagine, that miracle from those 2 brain surgeries and massive brain resections was not without cost. He is missing 2/3 of the left side of his brain. He's also missing half of his vision. And as you can imagine, people say you only need a certain percentage of the brain, but that's not true. You actually need your brain. So as you can imagine, it's left him with very significant developmental and cognitive delays. As you could also imagine, and I think as, Bill and Noah stated as well, this medical journey placed a significant and tremendous financial burden on our family. It becomes very difficult to work when that happens. So I think so often families not only have the cost of, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, neuropsychologists, all of the supports and therapies that our children need, but also we're trying to do that in a decreased work schedule, simply because it's impossible to, just transport your child to all the places they need to go. My husband and I have always thought of ourselves as some of the lucky ones, because, for starters, our marriage has stayed intact and we're doing this with 2 incomes and not a single parent. But I think so often many of the families of children with special needs are trying to make it by on 1 income. I've been really lucky to have a job that I've been able to have that flexibility to get my child the things that he needs. But again, many parents in our situation are not that lucky. So you can imagine, it was a very difficult decision for us when we were trying to make a decision on where to send Will to school. As is the case with many kids with a brain injury, he needs a lot of support and needs a really specialized education. He has difficulties with speech, cognition, memory, problem solving, reasoning, processing. We have a great relationship with our public district of residence, and we've been really lucky to be able to say that, but we knew they really just weren't going to be able to provide all of the specialized education that Will needed. And so we were really delighted to find Julie Billiart School, and even more delighted, as you can imagine, to find that Will would qualify for the John Peterson Scholarship, because it made it possible for our family to send him to a school that, was going to be able to provide an appropriate education for him. And because of the John Peterson Scholarship, covered, tuition was covered and it would be free and available to our family. He's now in the 6th grade. He's less than 40% of children with brain resections like his are ever able to learn to read, but thanks to Julie Billiart School, Will is able to read. He's making tremendous progress, and we're just delighted with where he is today. But we don't believe any of this would have been possible without the John Peterson Scholarship Program. Students like Will with traumatic brain injury, which is the highest category of funding for the John Peterson Scholarship, these are kids that have had brain resections, stroke, aneurysm, brain tumors, oxygen deprivation. These are kids with very severe and profound difficulties and needs. But unfortunately, there really just isn't a high number, and I suppose I should say fortunately, there just really isn't a high number of kids with traumatic brain injury compared to other disorders such as autism. And because of that, I feel as though so often, families like ours are a little bit overlooked because we really don't have advocacy groups out there for traumatic brain injury in the same way that I think there is advocacy groups for autism or, some of the other diagnoses. And as you can imagine, certainly our needs are not, lessened because of because of our diagnosis. I'm probably the only parent on this forum then that was really, really disappointed when I saw the increase that had been passed by the state to the Autism Scholarship. I was absolutely shocked this summer when I saw that. because there had been no corresponding increase passed on the John Peterson Scholarship. And I knew the day that that scholarship was passed that essentially the state had just mailed a bill to our family for $4,500 because, you know, we would be looking at schools, because they could now provide more services, increasing tuition, and we would not receive that benefit. And as I had anticipated, Julie Billiart has increased their tuition. And, you know, a lot of families of children with traumatic brain injury are not in a position where they can absorb $4,500 of additional expense. And it's sort of left parents who are already struggling. I mean, we pay $2,000 a year just to transport Will to school. We pay thousands of dollars in therapies. We pay a lot of out-of-pocket expenses to suddenly have to absorb an additional $4,500 simply because the state increased one without the other, really puts some difficult decisions on families. So, you know, I feel that I'm kind of left with, you know, my child doesn't have as many voices out there as I think other diagnoses have, and has put us into a position where, you know, advocacy is really needed to get that increase in the John Peterson Scholarship commensurate with autism.
And Kelly, I'm going to jump in here on the audience side of things. It's wonderful to hear your story about your son, although I feel like there's so much sorrow. Even there's joy, but sorrow. And personally, I work in this space, and the president is in this space because we think of the parent that on a Thursday night at 9:30 in the evening is trying to figure out what they're going to do for their kid. That's the best thing. And it's not a 9 to 5 thing. It's not a my kid can just go anywhere. We recognize that every parent deserves to put their kid in the school that is meant for them. And I can honestly say we did not contemplate what would happen in the marketplace as you're suggesting. We didn't contemplate that. We didn't say, oh, if we increase this scholarship, it's going to create this inequity in the marketplace. And so, I mean, had we contemplated that, perhaps we could have done something about it, which is absolutely the power of advocacy. We need to know that. We need to hear that from providers. We need to hear that from parents. We need to know that, and we simply didn't contemplate the fact that it really would put this burden back on you as a parent. And if we had known that, I think we would have advocated differently in the budget.
Thank you. And truly, I do want to emphasize my son is not, he is absolutely joy. And while we've had a lot of sorrow over his journey, where he is today is a wonderful place compared to where he could have been. So, but thank you.
Yeah, and I think it just repeats, it's worth repeating, this is exactly why we're doing this. Why we made the decision. Julie Billiart made the decision to call me and say, hey, we want to start advocating, and found Bridgeway, who was also advocating, and all these great stories is why we're here. I know, Lanny, you're obviously going to also jump into the question and answer, but there's a comment in the chat about continuing to advocate for the increases in autism because, you know, while we're experiencing very good budget periods from revenue standpoint, which was unexpected through COVID, but the Autism Scholarship, because it is a separate line item, can easily be cut by future governors and legislators if there's another economic collapse. I remember 2008, and a lot of programs that were individual line items were cut because of the economic downfall of that. So again, just more reason why we need to be doing what we're doing.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks, Avril, for putting your perspective on there that you didn't at all intend for this to happen. Kelly brought it to my attention because when we were advocating for both and we wrote the amendment in the budget for both, we didn't in a million years think that one would happen and one would not. Though we knew that there's always been a little bit of discrepancy between the two scholarships. I think that the question continues to lend itself to what can we do to make those voices louder? Because we oftentimes we're stuck understanding that, you know, traumatic brain injury may have a very different trajectory in life. And their path to success is going to look different than maybe a child on the spectrum. So who's determining what's an appropriate amount for that disability category? Because this is so, you know, one child on the spectrum, you know, one child on the spectrum. And so I think that sometimes there is going to be continued inequity unless we share these stories and do something about it. So Avril, from your perspective, what can we do? Because there's other people on this call that are in the exact same or similar situation to Kelly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best thing, so I was fortunate to go to the Bridgeway celebration earlier this year and tour that school. And I think one of the best ways for us to hear about your individual stories is for our legislators to be visiting your schools and visiting with parents at the schools. It is exceptional, and probably as a parent, to walk into a school that was created for your child, not a one size fits all, we're here and things look great, but a school that services your child as a whole child. And I think that that's not something that the legislature is really familiar with. I think we want to prioritize special needs in K-12. We want to try to do the right thing later on in the DD community, in all of the other areas that we work with. But I think that it's really impactful. I saw a lot of new legislators at the Bridgeway event. I think it's really impactful for our members to go in and say, and see the facilities that are created, see the environment that kids get to be part of, and see the things that are working well and the things that aren't working well. Certainly hearing this is an economic driver of people moving to the state is a new, unique piece of this, which I think we're glad to see people moving to the state, but we also are much more interested in kids achieving beyond their wildest dreams and their parents' wildest dreams. I think that that's so much more precious in this conversation. And I really do think that legislators need to be coming to your schools, meeting with your families and talking about your unique needs, because we look at this sort of as yes, we want to address special needs as a grouping, and how do we best do that at the state, and how do we balance that? And so exactly what you're doing here, educating parents so that they can feel empowered to talk to their legislators. Legislators are ordinary people with day jobs, and so but they are there to represent you. And so I think contacting them and sharing your stories, making the drive to Columbus if you can, or meeting with them in the district, you really just gotta, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you gotta share with them. The ugly, that we did create this scenario where you're looking at, well, I'm gonna pay the additional $4,000, or I gotta move my kid, or hopefully not sell any of your organs. Noah, hopefully that's not something you're going to contemplate again, but it really is at this point just telling us more of the story than we already are aware of.
Thanks, Avril.
Thank you, Avril. We really appreciate that. We are 5 minutes over, but this dialogue has been so wonderful that I was hesitant to cut anyone off. To our panelists, thank you so very much for sharing your stories, for sharing the why behind why we've gotten involved and why we are all here. To our attendees, we will be following up now that you are registered for this. We will not only follow up with a recording of this session, we will follow up on some of our Q&A questions that came in that we did not have the chance to directly answer. And we will also be giving you next steps as to how to get involved. It sounds like not only are we needing to reach out to our representatives, but we also need to find platforms for them to come and visit the schools that, like Bridgeway, like Julie Billiart schools, and some, the Rich Center for Autism at Youngstown State. It sounds like we need to set up some of those visits now that we can do that again. So we will be in touch. We hope this is the first forum of others and that we really do plan to figure out how we can raise the voice of all the parents who are making this critical choice as to what is the best environment for their child. So thank you again. I hope you all have lovely holiday season, and we appreciate all of your time today. Thank you.